Hola, flamingos. It has been a hot minute. This is my second round doing this. Originally, I recorded this without video because I completely forgot how I was doing everything. Um, it's also pretty early in the morning right now. Um, so I think the last time I dropped a video or a podcast would have been back in um, June 2022. Um, so I'm recording this September 23, so we're talking a while since the last time I did this. So on the writing front, I in July I released the Gonads and Goblins, which is a short story set in the world of the Body Bard. And it's kind of ties in a little bit to the Smoldering Kobold, which is the fourth book in the Body Bard series. It's coming very soon. I'm just waiting for some final edits, and then it's coming out into the world. So excited about that. What else? I've also got a book of philosophy coming out. So that's coming out in at some point in the fall. And this is my first book of philosophy. I previously released one, Night of Sophia, and it's one of these things that's a little bit tricky, I suppose. I've been pretty deeply ensconced in the whole philosophical thing for quite some time. A lot of it came out of my experiences in Peru and trying to make sense of what occurred and what, because the thing about it, for those of you who don't know, when I was 29, I went to Peru to drink ayahuasca. That was because I was in a very dark place personally. I had a lot of demons in terms of I just wasn't happy with myself. I wasn't very I didn't like myself very much. It was really bad. I tried a few different things like SSRIs it got so bad that I eventually decided to do that. I think I can't remember if I've spoken about this before. I'm sure I did, and I talk about it quite often. Because it was one of the best things I ever did in my life. It certainly changed. It was a turning point. Like, I had hit my own personal rock bottom, which is, not the rock bottom you read about in other from other people, and it wasn't like, it wasn't a flaming bus going off the side of the cliff, but it was pretty bad. It was bad enough that I was, not really happy. I was ready to check out myself, but it was really bad. And so I went down to Peru, and it turned my life around altogether. I went once in December 2014, and then I went again September 2015. I drank 11 times in ceremony, and it's one of these things where it's kind of, I'm sure anyone watching the video wouldn't be surprised seeing the crazy artwork I got behind me. This was a big, it changed me significantly, and part of what it did was give me an experience of God. And I always, like, using that word is always a bit fucked up because it's got so much baggage. It's, in Western culture, the Enlightenment, I'm talking like the 17th century or whatever, and like continuing, like there was a big move towards rationalism, and the most ground that, a lot of the scientific types would get would be some kind of like the clockmaker thing where God sets it up and walks away, essentially, which is basically atheism, without calling it atheism. But it's also, the idea is deeply, it carries this idea. Like I like to think of it, like when I grew up, I have very clear memories of totally dismissing it when I was like 7, something like that. I was hanging out with a buddy of mine. We were like skipping rocks down by a river, and then we had just gone to church with his family, and because my parents never took us to church, and I was like, I don't believe in this shit. Like, I don't understand why anyone would. There's no evidence or anything. That was pretty much my stance until I was, oh jeez, yeah, that was my whole stance for my whole life until, like, really until this happened. I had some other experiences that made me kind of question things a little bit in my 20s, but when I went down to Peru, that was kind of the end of it. And it's one of these things where the writing about it, it's such a funny thing. Like, one of my favorite definitions of God is that which is beyond words, which is something that Joseph Campbell used to describe it, which is great, but it does get at the real problem, which is that you cannot tell somebody else what God is. And this is still a problem that I have with a lot of religious thought and the way people discuss things, because I honestly don't know why anyone would believe it in without any kind of mystical experience of their own. It's still the only reason my opinion has changed is because of my own personal experiences. And those experiences can be blown, kind of like not just being like, they were catalyzed by this psychedelic ayahuasca, and that's an easy way to just basically dismiss it as some kind of, I don't know, like hallucination, like the notion that it was completely just a product of someone's own fantasies. But the weird thing about it is that the things that really got me, some of them happened while I was under the influence, but the big one that I can remember didn't, and that's why I'm calling this episode Encanto, which is Spanish for miracle. If you've ever seen that nice Disney movie that I love to watch with my daughter, it's such a good movie. But in any event, the whole thing, like, so just to kind of give you a little bit of background on what's been going on this year for me, there was a couple things that happened: breakup, and then 2 people died in my family. And we didn't have, this is not like my other grandparents died, but like my grandfather died when I was 4. My paternal grandmother died when I was it was a few years ago, but and I love my nanny. It was dad's mom, but we were never, like, we see each other all the time, but I never felt like I was ever really close with her, not in the way that I was with the grandmother who died this year. And my grandfather, when he passed, I was like, I don't know, 20 or something, and I was completely self-absorbed and going through my own shit, and I had a great experience, like I had a great relationship with him, but it was just like this one was something that hit me a lot differently. And she passed in January. In July, I eulogized her, which was a very intense experience. We went to Malone, New York, where the family's from, and did that. But the thing about this relationship with her is that it was extremely, like, when I say I was close with her, like, we would travel to Ontario to their cottage. My grandparents had a cottage there, and we would travel every summer. My mother would pack all of us up into this Dodge Caravan or something. I have 3 siblings, so it's 4 kids. I don't know how she fucking did it. Like, it seems insane to me. It's crazy enough having one, from my own experience. But she did it with 4 of us, and she would do it when school ended. Like, it'd be like the next day or two, we would get in and we would go, and it'd be a 2.5 hour drive from St. John's to Carlton Place, and then we'd spend the summer there. And so I spent more time with her during my formative years than I ever did with my dad's mother, so that's probably part of it. I mean, my nan, we'd see her for lunch and all that kind of stuff, but this was like it was just different. And when I went to Peru, this relationship I had with my grandmother, it was, she was a hard woman. Like, when you think of the grandmotherly type, like, she was not that. She was sweet in her own way. She had her moments, but there was like a lot of nastiness that kind of went on. And and I say that with all the love. Like, she was, she had her own trials and battles and her own life, and I don't judge anything. But when we were kids, she would do things that would kind of like be like a bit off the wall in terms of punishing us for stuff that you just expect of kids. I was not like, I'm sure, like, I know it wasn't like, don't have any illusions that I was like this, like, completely innocent. Like, I'm sure, like, I was doing stuff to piss her off, but she would punish me arbitrarily, and there was stuff like that she did. I remember one of the things. The thing about ayahuasca is it's a couple things. It can be literal, but usually it's metaphorical in terms of like it takes you through your own history and kind of helps you kind of like understand things, and that's why it's so good for like PTSD, and you kind of can look at things and kind of get an understanding, and it helps you put things in the past, and for me, just accept the past and like forgive and move on. And for me, what happened with her, I have like memories of her punishing me arbitrarily and doing things that I didn't, I just was upset like at the time, but I didn't realize how much they had affected me. And like there's one memory I have of we were at I was at my grandmother's. I was doing something, getting underfoot or something, and she said, Andrew, you can eat with the family, or we can have popcorn with the movie tonight. And so the popcorn with the movie, that was something that, like, so you gotta understand, my grandfather had this like old-timey movie popcorn setup that, like, the butter that he put into it was fucking orange. You'd get like the special butter. It was like the best popcorn. It tastes like movie theater popcorn. And we would watch movies and in the evening, and anyway, so that's like a big thrill, and especially to a kid, right? Like, I was like, I don't know, I was very young, 5, 6, 7, some yeah, 4 even. Like, I can't remember exactly when it happened, but I just have this very strong memory of me choosing the popcorn, because of course I did, because I'm a fucking kid, and I was out on the back step and basically just like isolated from the rest of the family. Like, they were inside eating and I was there on my own, and it didn't feel good. It felt felt like I was alone, and anyways, that's when a part of my personality like started to form, like to kind of protect me. Like, it, I don't know if you've ever looked into any of the internal family system stuff, like they talk about like having protectors and things that help protect us when we get into situations as kids, and this was before I had even known any of this stuff, but ayahuasca, like, I'd heard of any of this stuff. This was all stuff that I kind of like likened to my experience afterwards, but it was basically the notion that this thing, it was like an piece of armor that came up, and it basically made me cut myself off from the world, made me like think I was better, or like just kind of like, in order to kind of protect that, my little boy heart. Like it was just basically, it was this thing that kind of like separated me from other people. And one of the other things ayahuasca showed me, which is, again, something that afterwards kind of came out in my own research, kind of came out to be accurate in terms of psychological, the way we, things, basically the way neural networks get structured is, if you do something, whether it's, so there's fight or flight, or like on and off, and if you do something that, either run away or move forward towards something, 1-0, it's like a computer, and you survive, then that pathway gets reinforced, and the next time you're presented with a similar situation, it makes it easier to make that decision. And for me, it was like basically running away from confrontation and different sorts of things that, I didn't, I thought that there was something intrinsically wrong with me. And that was part of the legacy I grew up with, that, and personality forms on top of that. So that was kind of, it kind of like was given like this tour, and when I went and drank ayahuasca, of like what had happened to me and why I was so miserable. And a large part of it was to do with this relationship that I had with my grandmother. And that's not this, this is just, everybody's sensitive in their own way, and you never know what's going to affect somebody one way or another. I mean, I'm terrified of doing something that's going to traumatize my daughter in some way. It's something that really keeps me up in terms of, worries. Because, I've been through it, but I also think that there's something to be said that, we're all living through our own adventures and stories, and part of it is you need some kind of resistance to go up against in order to, flower and blossom into the person you're meant to be. And that does require darkness. Life is pain and suffering as well as joy and beauty. So, and again, like, this is no shade against my grandmother, my grandma Ginny, who I do love dearly. So, that was something I had to, like, make peace with. And then, like, another ceremony that occurred shortly afterward, the idea was, like, I had to go and so I hadn't spoken to her for years. Like, it was over a decade at that point. Like, basically what happened was I grew to hate her. And, in my teens, I called her an old bag, and, like, when my grandfather died, like, I just, I'd love to talk to him and see him, but then after that, it just kind of like nobody, I didn't want to anything to do with her, and so I stopped talking to her. And then the following, so I hadn't really thought about her that much, but then I kind of like realized all this, and it was, I wasn't like, it would have been easy to hate her and to say, like, well, look at all these fucking problems that I had with myself in terms of my own self-worth, and like, there was the different ways that it came up, like, in terms, like, the laziness, and, like, different ways that the trauma manifested in my life, and like, it would have been easy to just hate her and write her off, but I wanted to forgive her, because there's no sense holding on to it. She had no idea, what was going on with me, and anyways, but I was thinking at the time, or like I got this communication from ayahuasca, which is a bit weird thing about it. It feels like you're having a dialogue, and it's like you're almost in like a classroom, like getting taught things. Like, they call it a plant teacher, and a maestra in Spanish, which means a teacher. So there's a and so anyways, I went to that ceremony where, like, this was all happening. Like, it was like you gotta talk to her, tell her to come down and bring her down here and like, you know, have this like healing experience with her. And I was like, what the fuck, are you crazy? Like, there's no way. Like, you know, my family already thinks I'm fucking nuts for coming down to Peru and drinking this shit in the first place. You think I'm gonna like ask my grandmother, who's like 80 years old, to come down? Like, there's no way. Like, you know, there's absolutely no way. But it was like, okay, you got to do it. You got to do it. This is the only way you can heal from this. And I was just fucking flabbergasted. I couldn't believe it. Like, and so like after the ceremony, like people, they were kind of like coming down and like, you know, kind of like having like a conversation after, like, you know, the Icaros, which is like part of the shamans sing these songs during the ceremony. And anyways, it all gets finished up and then they like light a candle and everybody kind of like chats and stuff. But I didn't know like I couldn't believe what I'd just gone through. I was like so fucked up over it. And so the next morning, like, went to sleep, and then the next morning I woke up. I was like, oh my god, I gotta fucking do this. Because what it was like, you know, I got this message, you got to write her an email telling her all this and send it tomorrow. And, you know, we were in the jungle. Like, there was like they started up the generators for a few hours every day, and there was a place where you could get Wi-Fi, like one place in the whole camp. And so it was like, you got to go send that email. And I woke up, I went to eat breakfast, and I had a conversation with some people at the breakfast table, and they were like, you know, maybe, you know, it's more about reconnecting and not about any of this. And so, you know, that kind of something clicked in, and I was like, okay, yeah, that's what it is. And this is the thing about ayahuasca, is like kind of like over time things kind of start to make sense. You know, even if it seems crazy at the beginning, things start to fall into place afterwards sometimes. So this was one of those times, and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna write her an email, and I'm going to just say, I miss you, love you, and miss you, I want to reconnect with you. And so that's exactly what I did. This is the story of my Encanto. And, you know, this is one of these things that can be easily explained away by somebody who wasn't there, or it's just a coincidence, or, you know, but this was the thing, right? Like, there comes a point where, you know, you're, because I was very skeptical, and, you know, I still would say that I remain skeptical, in a general sense, but this was like, there was other stuff that happened, and, you know, but this was kind of like the thing that I just had no. Ram Dass tells a story about this miracle he experienced with Neem Karoli Baba that his own rational mind couldn't gotten to. He was not on any kind of drugs at the time, and this was my experience, because I was like completely down, like I'd gone to sleep, like I was not altered in any way at the time. So in any event, I was going to get up from the breakfast table, and it's in the Peruvian rainforest where it's usually sunny all the time, and this morning was no exception. It was like blue sky, not a cloud in the sky, sun, heat, all that stuff. And as I walked out, and I had to cross this boardwalk to get to the building, and because everything's on stilts, because we're going to worry about flooding when the Amazon rises. So I'm walking down and I entered the room, and then started to climb the stairs, and just as I started to, the fucking sky went dark. I mean, dark. Clouded over the whole thing. I climb up, I get to the spot where I'm going to set up my iPad to write the email, and I sit down. I'm like, how the fuck am I going to say to her? And I didn't know, I didn't even know what I was going to say to her before I sat down. So I'm there sitting for about 15 minutes, or 5 minutes, sorry, just trying to get my thoughts together. And then the moment I put my fingers on the keyboard, it starts raining, and it's a fucking deluge, coming down in sheets, crazy rain. And I just start writing this email, and it's a couple paragraphs just saying, hey, how you doing? I love you. I miss you. I'd like to, see you again soon. Something to that effect. And anyways, the rain comes down, and then after I finish my writing, I start crying. And this is probably the worst, not the worst, I should say, the most cathartic cry of my life, aside from maybe the cry that I had while I was eulogizing her, and then after I was finished the eulogy at the church there in July. So I was just fucking like bawling, and it was like the biggest psychic shit you could ever imagine. All this stuff's just like pent up emotion. And then the moment I stopped crying, and I'm talking the moment, it like the sun came out, and it was like you could hear the birds, and I could hear my friends, people I'd just met, like at the, they were all running and laughing and jumping in the puddles. And it was like, I just had this like strong intuition at that point about like the interconnectedness of the world, and just like, that's like the best I can describe it. It was like, this was an experience of God, I suppose. But it wasn't like, this idea of like God is like this like separated thing. It was more so like the pantheistic, everything is God, like we're all that, and this was just like how it plays essentially, is through our own existences. That's kind of like it again. This is like, there's no putting this into words that would make any kind of sense to another human being. Maybe somebody who's had a similar experience can, like, I think that's the only way that these things get transmitted. I mean, like I read all kinds of stuff where people talk about it, like Alan Watts and Ram Dass, and like like all these different philosophers talking about God in their different way. But it's like stuff that I'm like, okay, I see what you're trying to get at, but there's never something that, there's no just putting it into writing. I always beware people who are trying to collect followers, because nobody needs to follow anything as far as I'm concerned. But that's my own view, and anyone else his own version of the spiritual life, I think that's great. This is anyways, that was an experience of a miracle for me, and it was one of the things that kind of like broke me open in terms of my own lack of spirituality. I started opening up to more and more spirituality as time went on from that point. And there was more stuff that I experienced in Peru that I'm not going to get into here, that kind of like, I was like, holy fuck, there's no explaining this stuff away as the byproduct of a drug experience. And I do want to mention again that this was in Peru, where it's considered a national treasure. It's totally legal, and I wasn't breaking any laws when I did this. And again, this was kind of like a Hail Mary for my own mental health. I've been back. I went to Costa Rica, where it's also legal, in September 2019. I'm heading back to Peru with the shaman who I originally drank with in December. So this is kind of like, now it's become part of my own spiritual practice, and it's revered there. I mean, the meaning of the word is vine of the soul, but in any event, so that's the story of my miracle. I did go and see my grandmother. We rekindled a relationship. I did go to see her a couple times after that. I never ever told her about any of this while she was alive, and I would never would have recorded or talked about this publicly while she was alive, out of respect for her. And now it's more so, it's not to speak ill of the dead. She was a wonderful woman, and I would not be here without her. And I love her dearly. And the thing is like, people. All I would say, if there's anything that I can impart to anybody else, is that there's no point in holding a grudge against anybody. Forgiveness is one of the most powerful things I've ever experienced, and it was something that I did for me, not for anybody else. Like I said, I never said anything, I never told her, I never rubbed her nose and any of that stuff. And again, probably had no idea, but um, this was like this was a very important period for me, and it was very difficult and very it took a lot. So I'm writing. I've got this book that's coming out. That's a book of philosophy. I kind of get into a little bit more detail about all that stuff. So if you think that was an interesting story, Lounging Jaguar, a leisurely meat-eating heretic's guide to that mystical wasp name, is coming out somewhat soon. So that's it for today. We hit about half an hour, which is my normal time for the podcast. If you have any, if you want to write me an email, talk about anything like Andrew at andrewmarkrowe.com. If this was at all interesting to you. Otherwise, there's more stuff coming soon. I feel like I'm kind of out of it's past Labor Day now. I'm out of a bit of a fallow period. So that's it. Catch you on the flip side. Peace.